My name is Aurora Reynolds. I'm 28 years old and I live in Idaho. The cold air of Idaho felt nothing like the freezing spray of the Bering Sea. I stood on the front porch of my own house with my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, and I could still feel the motion of the waves in my legs. For the last 6 months, I had been a Coast Guard rescue swimmer, pulling drowning people out of 50-foot swells in the pitch-black dark. I was exhausted. I wanted nothing more than to sleep in my own bed. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. Heat rushed against my face. Christmas music was blasting. My house was full of people. My sister Ivy stood in the center of the living room with a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked expensive. She always did. My father spotted me first. He did not come over to hug me. He did not ask if I was safe. He just lifted his glass like he was making a toast, and the room slowly went quiet.
"Welcome home, sweetheart," he said, loud and cheerful enough for everyone to hear. "You're officially homeless now." Ivy giggled beside him. They both looked so proud of themselves. They thought they had sold my house behind my back to pay off Ivy's debts while I was away. They expected me to cry. They expected me to scream. Instead, I felt a cold, razor-thin smile spread across my face. They had no idea what I had discovered before I ever got on that plane. They did not know I had come home ready for war. To understand why my father's words at that Christmas party cut me so deeply, you have to understand the years before that moment. You have to understand who I was to them. I was not really a daughter. I was a bank account. I am a rescue swimmer. My job is to jump out of helicopters into freezing oceans and save people who are seconds away from dying. It is loud, dangerous, and exhausting. Every time I jump, I know the ocean could kill me. I spent years training my body to be strong. I learned how to hold my breath. I learned how to ignore pain. But the hardest pain to ignore was never the cold water. It was my phone screen. I remember one specific night about 2 years earlier. I was stationed in Oregon then, and I had just come back from a 12-hour shift. My muscles burned. My skin smelled like jet fuel and salt. I sat on my narrow bunk, picked up my phone, and saw my father calling me on FaceTime. I answered because I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted him to ask about my day. I wanted to tell him about the fishermen we had pulled out of the water. I wanted him to be proud of me. "Hey, Dad," I said, rubbing my eyes. "It's been a long day." He did not ask about my day. He looked stressed. He was sitting in his kitchen, the same kitchen I had paid to renovate the year before. "Listen, honey," he said. "We have a little situation." My stomach tightened. With him, there was always a situation. "What is it?" I asked. He sighed and said, "It's Ivy. She's having a hard time. Her car broke down and she can't get to her auditions. She needs a new transmission. It's expensive, Aurora." Ivy is my older sister. She is 30 years old. She has never held a job for more than 6 months. She calls herself an influencer or an actress, but mostly she just spends money. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I just sent you $2,000 last month for her rent. Why doesn't she have any savings?" He waved his hand dismissively. "You know how it is. The industry is tough. She's building her brand, Aurora. You wouldn't understand. You have a steady paycheck. You're lucky." Lucky. He called me lucky. He did not see the hours I spent in the gym. He did not see the terror of night jumps. He did not see the lonely holidays I spent on base because I could not afford to fly home. And the reason I could not afford to fly home was because I was sending my money to them. "How much?" I asked, because I was too tired to fight. $1,500, he said quickly. I closed my eyes. That was the money I had been saving for a new laptop. "Okay," I said, "I'll transfer it." His face softened just enough to hurt me. "You're a good girl," he said, and for 1 second I felt that warm feeling I had craved for years. He loved me. He needed me. He said he would tell Ivy, and she would be so grateful. But Ivy was not grateful. 3 days later, I saw her post on Instagram. She was not at a mechanic shop. She was in Las Vegas. In the photo, she was wearing a sparkly dress and holding a giant cocktail. But what made my blood run cold was the bag on her shoulder. It was a designer handbag. I looked it up online. It cost $1,800. She had not fixed her car.
She had bought a purse. I called my father with my hands shaking. "Dad, I saw Ivy's pictures," I said. "She's in Vegas. She bought a bag. You said she needed a transmission." "Oh, Aurora, stop it," he snapped. His tone changed instantly. He was no longer the needy, grateful father. He was annoyed. "She was depressed. She needed a pick-me-up. The car can wait." I could barely breathe. "Why are you always counting pennies?" he continued. "You make good money." "I risk my life for that money," I said, and my voice cracked. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "We are family. We help each other. Ivy is sensitive. She needs support. You are strong. You can handle it." That was always the story. Aurora is strong. Ivy is fragile. Aurora is the workhorse. Ivy is the show pony. I stayed quiet. I did not yell. I did not demand the money back. I had been trained to endure storms. I had been trained to keep my head down and do the job. I thought that if I just gave enough, if I just saved them enough times, eventually they would love me for me and not for my wallet. So I kept sending checks. I paid for the new roof on my father's house. I paid for Ivy's acting classes. I paid for their groceries when my father claimed he had forgotten his wallet. And then, after years of saving, I bought my own house. It was a small house near the lake in Idaho. It was not a mansion, but it was mine. I put every cent of my bonus money into the down payment. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I did not have to be a savior. I furnished it slowly. I painted the walls a calm blue. I locked the door at night and felt safe. Before I deployed to the Bering Sea for 6 months, I sat my father down at my kitchen table. "Dad," I said, "I'm leaving the keys with you. Just check on the pipes, make sure the heat stays on. Don't let anyone live here." "Of course, honey," he said. He hugged me. "It's safe with me. Go save lives. We'll be here waiting." I trusted him. He was my father, even after the lies, even after the money. I thought there was a line he would never cross. I thought my home was sacred. I was wrong. The silence I kept for years and the sacrifices I made did not buy me love. They only taught my family that I was a resource to be harvested. They learned that I would never fight back. They were about to learn that everyone has a breaking point. The Bering Sea is a lonely place. For months, my world was gray water, gray sky, and the orange of our rescue suits. We worked hard. When we were not flying missions, we were maintaining gear or sleeping. There was not much time for a personal life. The internet connection on the cutter was slow and unreliable. But about 2 weeks before I was scheduled to come home, we had a lull. The storm settled down. We had some downtime. I was sitting in the mess hall with a cup of stale coffee, my phone connected to the ship's Wi-Fi. It was slow, but it was working. I do not even know why I opened the Zillow app. It was just a habit. When you are far away from home, you look for pieces of it. I liked looking at my neighborhood. I liked seeing the estimated value of my house creep upward. It made me feel like I was building a future. I typed in my address. My heart stopped. Usually the app just showed a map and an estimate, but this time there was a red banner across the top of the photo. Pending sale. I blinked. I thought the app was glitching. I refreshed the page. The banner stayed there. Pending sale. I clicked on the listing. My hands started to sweat. There were photos. New photos. I scrolled through them and felt like someone had punched me in the chest. These were not the old photos from when I bought the house. These were new. There was my living room, but my furniture had been moved. My favorite blue armchair had been pushed into the corner. There was a vase of flowers on the coffee table. I did not own that vase. There was my kitchen. The counters had been cleared off. My coffee maker was gone. There was my bedroom. My bed was made with linens I had never seen before. Someone had been in my house. Someone had staged it. Someone had listed it. And someone had sold it. I looked at the listing agent's name. Chase Manning. I knew him. He was a local realtor my father played poker with. I looked at the price. It was listed for $50,000 less than it was worth. They were selling it cheap for a quick sale. I felt bile rise in my throat. I ran out of the mess hall and found a quiet corner on the deck. The freezing wind hit my face, but I was burning up. I called my father. It went straight to voicemail. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "call me back now." I called Ivy. She did not answer. I sent her a text. "Why is my house on Zillow?" Nothing. No typing bubbles, no reply. Just silence. I sat there on the cold steel deck staring at the gray ocean, trying to make sense of it. How was this possible? I owned the deed. My name was on the title. How could they sell a house that did not belong to them? Then I remembered the power of attorney. Before I deployed, I had signed a limited power of attorney document, giving my father the right to handle my finances in case of emergency. It was standard procedure for military personnel. It was meant to be used if I was in a coma or if a bill needed to be paid and I could not access my bank. It was a tool for protection. He had turned it into a weapon. I looked at the Zillow listing again. The status said pending under contract. That meant they had a buyer. That meant papers had been signed. That meant the closing date was coming. I checked the date on the listing. It had gone up 3 weeks earlier. For 3 weeks, while I was pulling dead bodies out of the water, my father and sister had been walking strangers through my bedroom. They had been negotiating the price of my life. I felt a tear freeze on my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I was not just sad. I was furious. I felt something shift inside me. It was like the tide turning. For years I had been the good daughter. I had been the quiet one. I had accepted the crumbs of affection they threw at me. But this was not just favoritism. This was theft. This was a crime. I looked at my phone again. Ivy still had not replied. That was when I realized they did not care about me. They did not care whether I had a home to come back to. They probably thought I would just roll over. They probably thought Aurora was nice. Aurora would forgive them. Aurora had a steady job. Aurora could buy another house. They were wrong. The Aurora who had left 6 months earlier was a daughter. The Aurora coming home was a soldier. I stood up. I walked back into the ship. I did not go to my bunk to cry. I went to the ship's office to find a printer. I had work to do. I needed help. I could not fight this alone from the middle of the ocean. I thought of Princess Lewis. We had gone to Coast Guard boot camp together. She was tough, smart, and terrifyingly organized. After her service, she had used her GI Bill to go to law school. Now she was a JAG attorney, a military lawyer. I sent her a message on Facebook. "Princess, I need you. Emergency. Legal issue with family. Please call." She called me on an encrypted audio app 10 minutes later. "Rory," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "I'm here. What's happening?" "Are you okay?" "I'm alive," I said, "but my father is selling my house." I told her everything. The Zillow listing, the power of attorney, the silence from my family. "Okay, Princess," said. I could hear her typing furiously on a keyboard in the background. "Give me your social security number and your address. I'm going to pull the county records. Stay on the line." I waited. The silence stretched for 2 minutes. The only sounds were the hum of the ship's engine and the clicking of Princess's keys. Then she whispered, "Oh, Rory, this is bad. This is really bad." I braced myself. "Tell me." "Okay, listen to me," she said. "It's not just the sale. There's a lien." "A what?" "A home equity line of credit, a HELOC. It was opened 4 months ago in your name." "I didn't open a line of credit," I said. "Your father did," she replied. "He used the power of attorney. He signed for it. He took out $140,000 against the equity of your house." I felt dizzy. My father had taken a loan against my house. "Where is the money?" I asked. "I can see the transfer records because it's a public deed recording linked to the bank," she said. "The funds were deposited into a joint account. It looks like the account is shared by your father and Ivy Reynolds." "Ivy," I breathed. Princess continued and her voice grew colder. The money was moved out in large chunks. Payments to credit card companies, payments to a luxury car dealership, and a massive transfer to Stardust LLC. "That's Ivy's brand," I said. "She started a company for her influencer career." "So Princess said he mortgaged your house to pay off Ivy's debts and fund her business. Now he is selling the house to pay off the loan he took out." I understood it all at once. He was selling my house so he would not get caught. If he sold it, the loan would be paid off at closing, and I would be left with no house and no money. Exactly, Princess said. And here is the kicker, Rory. The buyer, it is listed as an LLC, but the registered agent is Alora Vance. I let out a harsh, dry laugh. Alora? That's Ivy's best friend. Her husband is Rhett. He's a flipper. They flip houses. So it's an inside job, Princess summarized. Your dad gives the house to Ivy's friends at a discount. They probably promised to give Ivy a kickback. Your dad pays off the illegal loan, you come home homeless, and they tell you it was market forces or some other lie. Can they do this? I asked. Is it legal? Technically, the power of attorney gives him the ability to sign, Princess said. But he has a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Stealing your equity to buy his other daughter a Mercedes is not in your best interest. It is fraud. It is breach of fiduciary duty. It is theft. A cold rage settled in my stomach. It was heavy and solid. What do I do? I asked. The sale is pending, she said. It has not closed yet. The closing date is listed for December 26th. The day after Christmas, I said. You have time, she replied. But you need evidence. I'm going to email you every document I found. The deed of trust, the loan documents, the transfer records. I need you to print everything. Make a file, a physical file. I will, I said. And Rory Princess added, do not tell them you know. If they know you know, they might try to rush the closing or hide the money. Let them think you are clueless. Let them think you are the sweet, dumb daughter. I can do that, I said. Document everything, she commanded. Every text, every voicemail. If you talk to them, record it. If your state allows one-party consent, Idaho is a one-party consent state, I said automatically. I knew the laws. Good girl, Princess said. Go get them, Rory. Burn it down. I hung up. My email pinged. It was from Princess. The subject line said, evidence. I opened the attachment. It was 40 pages long. I stared at the numbers. My life, my hard work, my blood and sweat, all reduced to numbers on a page that my father had stolen so Ivy could look rich? I walked to the printer. I loaded a fresh ream of paper. I watched the pages slide out one by one. Each page was a nail in their coffin. I did not wait for the cutter to return to port. I requested emergency leave. I went to my commander and stood tall in his office. Sir, I said, I have a family emergency. I need to go home immediately. He looked at my face. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not ask for details. He just signed the paper. Go. We'll get you on the next supply flight to Anchorage. The journey home was a blur of airports and anger. I flew from the cutter to Anchorage, then from Anchorage to Seattle, then from Seattle to Boise, and finally on a small jumper flight to my hometown. It was 21 hours of travel. I did not sleep. I could not. My mind would not stop racing. At the Anchorage airport during a 4-hour layover, I went to the business center. I bought a thick black binder. I bought plastic sheet protectors. I bought a 3-hole punch. I sat at a desk in the corner surrounded by businessmen in suits and laid out my documents. I organized everything chronologically. Tab 1 was the original deed. My name. Only my name. Tab 2 was the power of attorney, with the specific clause that said it had to be used only for the benefit of the principal. Tab 3 was the HELOC loan. The signature that looked like mine but was not mine. The date? August 14th, 2 weeks after I left. Tab 4 was the bank statements, the money entering the account, the money leaving. $4,000 to Lux Auto, $12,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue, $25,000 to Stardust LLC. Tab 5 was the real estate contract, the lowball price, the buyer's name, Alora Vance. It was a story of betrayal told in paper. It was undeniable. It was cold. It was perfect. I snapped the binder rings shut, and the sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I boarded the plane to Seattle, holding that binder against my chest like a shield. During the flight, I rehearsed what I would say. I imagined their faces. I imagined Ivy's fake smile. I imagined my father's booming voice. I used to be afraid of my father's voice. When he yelled, I would shrink. I would apologize even when I had done nothing wrong. I just wanted peace. But I was not afraid anymore. You cannot be afraid of a loud man when you have faced 50-foot waves. You cannot be intimidated by a sister's tantrums when you have held a dying man in your arms. They were small, they were petty, and they were about to lose. I landed in Idaho on Christmas Eve. The airport was full of families hugging. People wore Santa hats. Children cried. I walked past them alone and went to the rental car counter. "I need a car," I told the clerk. "Something reliable." I got a silver sedan. I threw my duffel bag in the back seat. The binder went in the passenger seat right next to me. I drove out of the airport and onto the highway. Snow was falling heavily. The roads were slick. I drove carefully. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. "Hey, honey, when do you land? We're all at the house waiting for you. It's a party." He lied so easily. At the house. He meant my house, the house he had sold. I did not reply. I drove through the familiar streets of my town. Everything looked the same. Christmas lights hung from the lampposts. The diner was closed for the holiday. I turned onto my street and saw my house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was lit up like a carnival. Every light was on. Cars were parked all over the driveway and even on the lawn. My lawn. I saw Ivy's bright pink Jeep. I saw my father's truck. I saw a Range Rover that I knew belonged to Alora and Rhett. They were partying. They were celebrating the sale. They were drinking champagne bought with my equity. I parked the rental car across the street and turned off the engine. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were dark. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I was not the pretty girl they wanted me to be. I was the rescue swimmer. "Showtime," I whispered to myself. I grabbed the black binder and stepped out into the snow. The cold air bit my skin, but I barely felt it. I walked up the driveway. I could hear the music inside. It was Mariah Carey. I reached the front door. I did not knock. It was my house. I had a key. I unlocked the door and pushed it open, bringing the winter chill in with me. I stepped into the hallway. The heat inside the house was suffocating. It smelled like expensive perfume, pine needles, and stale beer. For a moment, nobody noticed me. The music was loud, a pop cover of Santa Baby. People were laughing in the kitchen. I saw faces I recognized, neighbors I had grown up with, Ivy's friends from high school, the pastor from my father's church. They were all drinking my wine. They were standing on my hardwood floors. I walked into the living room. Ivy was the first to see me. She stood by the fireplace wearing a white cashmere sweater and a silver sequin skirt. She looked like an angel. She looked like she had never worked a day in her life. Her eyes widened. She tapped my father on the shoulder. He turned around with a glass of champagne in his hand. His face was flushed red, probably from alcohol. When he saw me, he did not look guilty. He did not look ashamed. He looked annoyed, like I had arrived at the wrong time. Then he plastered a big, fake smile across his face and raised his hands in the air. "Aurora!" he boomed. The music seemed to lower as people turned to look. "Look who it is. The hero returns." He walked over and tried to hug me. I did not move. I stood stiff as a board with my arms at my sides. He smelled like scotch and mint. "We were just talking about you," he said as he pulled back. He did not look me in the eye. He looked over my shoulder and addressed the room. "Everyone, my daughter is home from the sea." There was a smattering of applause. It sounded fake. Then my father leaned close to me and dropped his voice. "Why do you look like that? You look like a ghost. Go upstairs and change. Put on a dress. You're embarrassing your sister." "I'm not going upstairs," I said. My voice was low and steady. "And I'm not changing." He laughed nervously. He turned back toward the room and spotted Alora and Rhett near the Christmas tree. Rhett was holding a signed contract in his hand like a trophy. My father grabbed my arm. His grip was tight. He pulled me toward the center of the room. "Well, since you're here," he announced, his booming voice returning, "we have some big news. A little Christmas surprise." I knew what was coming. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face stayed stone cold. "Aurora," he said, smiling that shark-like smile, "we know how hard you work. We know how much of a burden this house has been for you. The maintenance, the taxes, all of it. It is too much for a single girl who is never home." He paused for dramatic effect.
Ivy was beaming. She looked at Alora and squealed. "So," my father continued, "we took care of it for you. We sold the place to our dear friends Alora and Rhett." The room cheered. Rhett raised the contract in the air. My father looked at me, expecting gratitude. "Welcome home, sweetheart. You're officially homeless now. But don't worry, we got a great price and you can stay in the guest room at my place until you find a rental." The room went silent, waiting for my reaction. They expected me to cry. They expected me to thank them. I looked at my father, then at Ivy, then at the buyers, Alora and Rhett. I did not scream. I did not cry. I smiled. It was slow and dangerous. "You sold my house," I said flatly. "We did," Ivy chimed in, walking over and draping her arm around our father. "It's for the best, Rory. You're never here anyway, and Alora really needs a place to raise her baby. It's a win-win." "And the money?" I asked. "Where is the money from the sale going?" My father's smile faltered for a second. "Well, into the family trust, of course. For safekeeping. We'll manage it for you." "The family trust?" I said. "You mean the joint account you share with Ivy?" His eyes narrowed. "Now, Aurora, don't start this, not in front of guests." "I think the guests should hear this," I said, raising my voice. "I think Alora and Rhett should hear this." I lifted the black binder and placed it on the coffee table with a heavy thud. Ivy looked at it with disgust. "What is that?" "That," I said, "is a paper trail." I opened the binder and turned to the first section. "Alora," I said, looking directly at the woman who thought she was buying my home. "Rhett, did you run a title search?" Rhett looked confused. "The title company is handling that. We close on the 26th. You might want to see this." I pulled out the page showing the home equity line of credit. "My father took out a loan for $140,000 against this house in August," I said clearly. "He used a power of attorney that was only for emergencies. He did not use the money for an emergency. He used it to pay off Ivy's credit cards." I turned the page and pointed to the bank transfer records. "See? August 15th, $12,000 to Visa. August 20th, $4,000 for a lease down payment on a Range Rover. August 25th, $25,000 to Stardust LLC. Ivy's face went pale. "That's private," she shrieked. "Dad, make her stop." My father lunged for the binder. "That's enough, Aurora. You are drunk. You are tired." I stepped back and snatched the binder away. I was faster than him. I was stronger than him. I had trained to fight currents that could crush a boat. He was just an old man who stole from his daughter. "I am not drunk," I said. "I am sober, and I am furious." I turned to Rhett. He looked pale. "Rhett," I said, "my father is selling you this house to pay off that illegal loan. Before I found out about it, he is committing mortgage fraud. If you close on this house, you are buying stolen property. I will sue you. I will tie this title up in court for 10 years. You will never live here." Rhett dropped the contract. It fluttered to the floor. "Is this true?" he asked, looking at my father. "Jim, is there a lien on the house?" "It's a misunderstanding," my father stammered. He was sweating now. "I was going to pay it off with the proceeds. It's standard business." "It is not business," I said. "It is theft." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. It was a text message from Princess, my JAG lawyer friend. "I have already reported the fraudulent use of the power of attorney to the bank," I lied. I had not done it yet, but they did not know that. "The account is frozen. The sale cannot close." "You ungrateful brat," my father hissed. His face twisted into a snarl. The mask of the loving father fell away completely. "After everything I did for you, I raised you. This money is mine." "Family share. Family share," I repeated. "But you did not ask to share. You stole. You stole my safety. You stole my future. You stole the roof over my head while I was risking my life and sending you money." I looked at Ivy. She was crying now, but not because she was sorry. She was crying because she was scared. "And you?" I said to her. "You are 30 years old. Get a job." The room was dead silent. The party guests were frozen. Nobody was drinking. The music had stopped. "Get out!" my father screamed, pointing at the door. "Get out of my house!" "It is not your house," I said calmly. "It is mine. My name is on the deed. But don't worry, I'm leaving." I looked around at the decorations, the people, the mess. It did not feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. "I'm going to a hotel," I said. "Rhett, Alora, I suggest you meet me at the Lakeside Cafe tomorrow morning at 9. If you don't, I will name you as co-conspirators in the lawsuit I am filing on Tuesday." I did not wait for an answer. I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard Ivy screaming. I heard my father throw a glass against the wall. It shattered. I walked into the snow. The cold air felt clean. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I got into my rental car and drove away. I did not look back. I did not sleep much that night. I stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, but it was better than being in that house. I woke up at 7 in the morning, showered, and put on my Coast Guard sweatshirt and a pair of jeans. I pulled my hair back tight. I wanted to look like myself. I drank terrible coffee from the lobby and reviewed my binder again. At 8:45, I drove to the Lakeside Cafe. It was a small diner near the water. It was quiet the day after Christmas. I took a booth in the back and laid the black binder on the table. At exactly 9, the door opened. Alora and Rhett walked in. They looked terrible. Alora's eyes were puffy like she had been crying all night. Rhett looked gray and anxious. They were not the confident, wealthy couple from the party anymore. They looked like people who had realized they had stepped into a bear trap. They saw me and walked over. They sat down across from me. They did not order coffee. Aurora Rhett started, his voice shaky. "Look, we didn't know. We swear. Your dad told us you wanted to sell. He said you were moving to Alaska permanently." "He lied," I said simply. Alora's voice trembled. "We put down a $10,000 earnest money deposit. He cashed the check yesterday." I nodded. I assumed he would. "That's our savings," Alora said, tears welling in her eyes. "Rhett flips houses, but the market has been slow. We needed this deal. If we lose that 10,000, "You won't just lose the 10,000, I said. I opened the binder. "If you try to close on this house, you will lose everything." I pushed the binder toward them. "Read tab 5. Rhett opened the binder and read the highlighted text. It was a printout of the Idaho state statute regarding fraudulent inducement and conspiracy to commit fraud. "My lawyer tells me that since you are close personal friends with Ivy, I said a judge might believe you were part of the scam. You are buying a house for $50,000 under market value. That looks suspicious, Rhett. That looks like a kickback." Rhett went pale. "We aren't part of it. We just wanted a deal." "I believe you," I said, "but the court won't. Unless—" I let the word hang in the air. "Unless what?" Rhett asked, leaning in. He was desperate. "Unless you help me." Alora stared at me. "How? You were victims too," I said. "My father defrauded you. He took your deposit for a house he had no legal right to sell because the power of attorney became invalid the moment he used it for his own benefit. He acted in bad faith." I pulled out a notepad. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. My voice was calm, almost instructional. It was the voice I used when training rookies. "You are not going to buy my house. The sale is canceled." Rhett nodded vigorously. "Done. We don't want it." "But you want your $10,000 back," I said. "Yes," Alora said. "He doesn't have it," I told them. It was brutal, but it was the truth. He spent it or moved it to hide it. You will not get it back by asking nicely. "So what do we do?" Rhett asked. "You sue him." I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a list of lawyers Princess had sent me. "These are real estate attorneys. You are going to hire one of them today. You are going to file a civil suit against Jim Reynolds and Ivy Reynolds for fraud, breach of contract, and theft by deception." Rhett stared at the list. Alora inhaled sharply. "Sue your dad." "He's your dad." "He stole from me," I said, "and he stole from you. If you sue him, you create a record. You prove that you were not part of the scam. You become victims." I looked Rhett in the eye. "I will testify for you. I will bring this binder to court. I will stand up and say, my father lied to you, took your money, and tried to sell my property illegally.
I will hand over the bank records proving he funneled the money to Ivy. Alora looked at Rhett. We have to do it, Rhett. We need that money back. Rhett took a deep breath. He looked at the binder, then at me. You really want to take him down? He asked. This could ruin him. Bankruptcy, maybe even jail. I looked out the window at the frozen lake. I thought about the cold nights on the ship. I thought about the text asking for money for a transmission that became a handbag. I thought about the toast that welcomed me home as homeless. It was not about revenge. It was about stopping him. If I did not stop him, he would do it again. He would drain me dry until I had nothing left. He ruined himself, I said. I'm just turning on the lights. Rhett nodded and picked up the list of lawyers. Okay, he said. We'll call the lawyer. Call Chase Manning, too, I added. Tell him the deal is off because of fraud. Tell him you are reporting him to the real estate board for listing a house without verifying the owner's intent. Chase will lose his license, Rhett said. Chase should have done his job, I replied. I closed the binder and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was not the helpless daughter anymore. I was the commander of the operation. Do it today, I said. Don't warn him, just file. Rhett and Alora stood. They looked shaken, but they also looked determined. They had a target now, and it was not me. I'm sorry, Aurora, Alora said quietly. We really didn't know. I know, I said. They walked out of the cafe. I watched them get into their Range Rover. I saw Rhett pick up his phone immediately. I sat alone in the booth for a moment and took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but I did not mind. I had just turned my father's allies into his enemies. I had just dismantled his plan with a single conversation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ivy. You ruined Christmas. I hate you. Dad is crying. I looked at the message and felt nothing like guilt. I typed back. He isn't crying because he's sad. He's crying because he got caught. Then I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's number. I paid for my coffee and walked out. I had one more stop to make. I had to go to the courthouse and file my own protection order. The war was not over, but the tide had officially turned. The collapse did not happen all at once. It was not like a building blowing up. It was more like slow rot finally causing the floor to give way. I did not stay close enough to watch it all unfold in person. I stayed in my motel room. I went to the base. I did my job, but I heard about it. In a small town, you hear everything. And because I had hired a lawyer, I saw the paperwork. It started with Rhett and Alora. They did not waste time. They filed their lawsuit on December 28th. They sued for the return of their earnest money, plus damages for legal fees and emotional distress. They named my father Ivy and the realtor Chase Manning. Because Rhett was well known in the local real estate community, the news traveled fast. Chase Manning was the first domino to fall. I was not there, but Princess told me what happened. She got the report from the state licensing board. Rhett had filed a formal complaint. He attached the text messages where Chase admitted he knew I was not in the country and had never spoken to me directly. Chase tried to say he was following my father's instructions, but the law was clear. A realtor has to verify the seller. Chase had ignored the red flags because he wanted the commission. 2 weeks into January, Chase's face disappeared from the bus stop benches around town. His for sale signs were pulled out of lawns. His license was suspended pending an investigation. A month later, it was revoked. He lost his career because he thought my father was untouchable. Ivy's collapse was louder. It was public. Princess was ruthless. She subpoenaed Ivy's bank records to prove where the money from the illegal loan had gone. We needed to prove unjust enrichment. The records became public during the discovery phase of the lawsuit. Everyone saw it. They saw the $4,000 lease payment on the Range Rover. They saw the $12,000 credit card bill for wardrobe expenses. They saw the transfers to Stardust LLC that were immediately spent on spa treatments and trips to Cabo. Ivy had built her entire online persona around being a self-made success. She posted about hustle culture. She posted about being a boss babe. Now the truth was out. She was not a boss. She was a thief. She had stolen from her deployed sister to buy handbags. The comment section on her Instagram turned toxic overnight. People hate a liar. They asked her if she had really bought that bag with her sister's military pay. They called her a fraud. They called her a thief. Ivy tried to delete the comments. Then she turned off comments.
Then, about 3 weeks after Christmas, she deleted her account entirely. Her brand deals vanished. The free shampoos vanished. The discount codes for leggings vanished. No company wanted to be associated with a woman being sued for fraud. She lost her car. The dealership repossessed the Range Rover when the payments stopped. My father could not pay them anymore. My father's fall was the hardest to watch. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because he had always seemed so big to me. He was the patriarch. He was the one in charge. Now he was just a man drowning in the debt he created. Rhett and Alora's lawsuit froze his assets. Then the bank stepped in. When I alerted the bank to the fraudulent power of attorney, they launched an internal fraud investigation. They froze the home equity line of credit. They demanded immediate repayment of the $140,000 he had already spent. He did not have it. He had spent it on Ivy. The bank moved to foreclose on his house, the house I grew up in, to recover their losses. They also seized his rental property, a small duplex he owned across town. He tried to call me. My phone showed the blocked calls in the log. 10 times a day, then 20, then 0. He realized I was not coming to save him. In February, I received a notification from the court. James Reynolds had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It was over. He lost his rental properties. He lost his truck, the big shiny Ford F-150 that he loved more than he loved me. I saw it listed on an auction site. It looked small in the photo. He was forced to move into a small apartment on the bad side of town. Ivy had to move in with him because she had nowhere else to go. I imagined them there, two people who thought they were royalty, now living in a cramped 2-bedroom box, blaming everyone but themselves. I did not gloat. I did not drive by to laugh at them. I did not post about it on Facebook. I just watched the legal updates come in. Judgment entered. Assets seized. Case closed. This was not revenge. I did not do it to hurt them. I did it to stop them from hurting me. It was accountability. And for people who have never been held accountable, accountability feels like an attack. March came. The snow started to melt. The days grew longer. The legal dust had settled. The sale to Rhett and Alora was officially dead. The lien on my house was complicated, but because we proved fraud, the bank had to go after my father's assets, not my house, to satisfy the debt. Princess was a miracle worker. She untangled the title. On a Tuesday morning, I got the call. "The house is yours again, Rory," she said. "Clear title. No liens. You can move back in." I drove to the house and stood in the driveway. It looked the same as it had before. The paint was the same. The windows were the same. I unlocked the door and walked inside. The house was cold. It smelled musty. I walked through the rooms and saw the ghost of the Christmas party. I saw the spot on the rug where I had dropped the binder. I saw the wall where my father had thrown the glass. There was still a small dent in the drywall. I went to my bedroom. My bed was there. I sat down on the mattress and waited to feel relief. I waited for the sense of home to come back. But I did not feel it. This was not my sanctuary anymore. It had been violated. My father had walked through these rooms calculating how much money he could get from my life. Ivy had walked through here touching my things, thinking she deserved them more than I did. The walls had eyes. The floorboards remembered the betrayal. I could not live there. If I stayed, I would always be the daughter who had to fight her family for the keys. I would always be looking over my shoulder. I stood up and made a decision. I called a real estate agent. Not Chase Manning, but a different one. Her name was Sarah, and she had a reputation for being honest. "I want to sell it," I told her. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You just got it back." "I'm sure," I said. "I need a clean slate." We listed it. This time, I listed it. I set the price. It sold in 4 days. The buyers were a young couple. The husband was in the Navy, stationed at the nearby training center. His wife was pregnant. They reminded me of myself starting out, hopeful, looking for a place to build a life. When I handed them the keys at the closing table, the wife had tears in her eyes. "We love it so much," she said. "It feels like a happy home." I smiled. "It is," I told her. "Make it your own." I walked away with a check, a big check. The market had gone up. I looked at the number. It was enough money to buy a bigger house, enough money to buy a fancy car. But that money felt heavy. It was tied to the drama. I kept my original down payment amount, the money I had earned with my own sweat before the nightmare began. The rest, the profit, I wrote as a check to the Coast Guard Foundation. It is a charity that helps the families of Coast Guard members who die in the line of duty. It helps pay for their children's college. It helps with emergency relief. I mailed the check. Then I looked for an apartment. I found a place in the city 40 minutes away from my old neighborhood. It was on the 4th floor of an old brick building. It had big windows that looked out over the lake. It was small, just 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen and a living room, but it was secure. You needed a key fob to get into the building. You needed a code to get into the elevator. I moved in on a rainy Saturday. I did not bring much. I bought a new couch, a gray one, not blue. I bought new plates. I sat on my balcony and watched the rain hit the lake. I had one last piece of business. I went to the courthouse one last time and stood before a judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I am requesting a permanent order of protection against James Reynolds and Ivy Reynolds. I submitted the police reports. I submitted the fraud evidence. I submitted transcripts of the voicemails my father had left me when he was drunk, screaming that I was a traitor and that I owed him everything." The judge looked at the file. Then he looked at me. He saw a woman who was done being a victim. "Granted," he said. 5 years no contact. If they come within 500 feet of you, they go to jail." I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter. My steps were faster. I drove to my new apartment. I parked in my spot. I went up the elevator. I locked my door. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I was not lonely. I was safe. The silence in the apartment was not empty. It was peaceful. Christmas came again. It had been exactly 1 year since the welcome home party. 1 year since my father told me I was homeless. The Idaho winter was brutal that year. Snow was piled 3 feet high on my balcony. The wind howled outside the glass, but inside my apartment, it was warm. I did not have a big tree. I had a small artificial tree sitting on a side table. It did not have expensive glass ornaments. It had a few simple lights and a star I had made myself out of scrap titanium wire from the base workshop. The apartment smelled like garlic, searing meat, and laughter. I was not alone. Princess was there. She had flown in from D.C. She was wearing a silly sweater with a reindeer on it and chopping vegetables at my tiny counter while arguing about legal theory with Doc. Doc was our unit's medic. He was a quiet man with kind eyes, and he had stitched up my hand more times than I could count. At that moment, he was trying to fit a massive tray of marinated beef into my small oven. Ramirez and Cho were there too. They were rescue swimmers from my team. They sat on my floor playing a video game on the TV and shouting insults at each other in good fun. "You cheat!" Cho Ramirez yelled. "That was a glitch. Get better, Ramirez," Cho laughed. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a drink and watched them. These were the people who knew me. Princess knew how scared I had been when I first filed the lawsuit. She was the one who answered the phone at 2 in the morning when I was crying because I missed the idea of having a father. Doc knew my physical limits. He knew how to calm me down after a bad mission when my hands would not stop shaking. Ramirez and Cho knew I would never leave them behind in the water. They trusted me with their lives, and I trusted them with mine. They did not want my money. They did not care about my house. They did not ask for credit cards or designer bags. They just wanted to be there. They had flown across the country to eat tacos in a small apartment because they loved me. "Hey, Aurora Princess," called out. "Stop spacing out and help me with the guacamole. I need a master chef." I smiled. "Coming!" I walked over and picked up a knife. We cooked together. We bumped elbows in the tiny kitchen. It was chaotic and messy and loud. We ate sitting on the floor and on the couch because I did not have a dining table big enough for everyone. We told stories about boot camp. We made fun of our commander. We talked about the future. Nobody mentioned my father. Nobody mentioned Ivy. Their names did not belong there. They were ghosts from a past life. Later that night, the snow stopped falling. The sky cleared. I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air. Princess followed me and handed me a mug of hot cocoa. "You okay?" she asked. I looked out at the frozen lake. It was dark and still. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "I'm good." "It's a lot better than last year," she said. "It's a different world," I replied. I thought about the word family. For 28 years, I thought family meant the people who shared DNA with you. I thought it meant obligation.
I thought it meant you had to let them hurt you because blood was thicker than water. That was a lie.
A lie told by people who wanted to use you. The full quote is actually, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose are stronger than the bonds you were born into. My father and Ivy were my biology, but the people inside my apartment, laughing, eating, cleaning up the mess, they were my family. Loyalty is a choice. Presence is a choice. Love is a verb. It is something you do, not just something you say. My father chose money. I chose peace. I took a sip of cocoa. It was sweet and warm. Inside, Cho let out a loud cheer as he finally beat Ramirez at the game, and the whole room erupted in laughter. I turned my back on the cold, dark lake. I turned my back on the memories of the big house and the empty promises. I opened the sliding glass door and stepped back inside into the warmth and the noise of the people who actually gave a damn. I was home.